The truck halted deep in the Sonoran Desert, its engine wheezing in the oppressive warmth. When the back gate fell open, Staff Sergeant Maya Torres slammed onto the sand, her hands bound, throat parched from endless quiet. Lieutenant Rafael Vargas of the cartel loomed above her, his boots sinking into the loose dirt. "You, Delta Force," he scoffed, his English thick with an accent. "Always so strong, let's see that strength without water." He flung 2 bottles into the sand, just out of her reach. His men chuckled, a harsh fading noise quickly lost in the vast empty landscape. The sun beat down relentlessly, over 116 degrees and rising. The air vibrated with intense heat. The stench of burned oil, dust, and her own sweat made each breath painful. Maya remained silent. She noted the sun's position, timed the wind gusts, and mentally charted the area. Her training silenced her fear. Quiet overcame weakness. Vargas spat by her boot. 2 days, soldier. We'll see if your military finds remains or nothing at all." He walked away. The desert absorbed his words. Before we begin, make sure to subscribe to Military and Veteran Stories so you never miss these true tales of courage. And tell us in the comments, where are you watching from today? The desert had stripped her of everything: equipment, water, shelter, but her memories remain, and in those memories, Maya Torres was always more than just a soldier. She was a quiet force, built brick by brick. Tucson, Arizona. Long before any uniform, she lived in a dry heat that bleached every color, from roads to paint, even draining patience. Her father, Miguel Torres, a former Army Ranger, would wake her before dawn to see the sun rise over the Catalina Mountains. He'd often tell her, "The desert doesn't care how strong you think you are, kid. It teaches you strength." He never raised his voice. He never had to. Maya quickly learned that true power wasn't loud. It simply existed, and others adapted. Her mother died when Maya was 11. This left her, her father, and her younger sister Lena, a girl whose sketchbooks held constellations and whose eyes were too gentle for their harsh world. Maya worked extra shifts throughout high school. Days at a gas station, nights as a volunteer EMT. It wasn't for money, it was for control. Blood didn't make her flinch. Sirens made her drive faster. It wasn't adrenaline, it was pure concentration. At 19, she entered a recruiting office, carrying only a backpack, a steady gaze, and a stillness that made the sergeant at the desk do a double take. "Any family in the service?" he inquired. She nodded. "Rangers," he smirked. "Then you already know the hardship you're choosing." Basic training was as expected. Relentless heat, exhaustion, and minds pushed beyond their limits. Maya never sought attention. When her group ran, she finished third. When they marched, she carried extra weight. When others spoke of quitting, she said nothing. Her drill instructors often remarked, "Torres doesn't crack. She simply outlasts everyone else." 2 years later, she volunteered for airborne school at Fort Benning. Instructors smirked as she stepped off the bus. Her small build, quiet voice, not what they expected from a paratrooper. "Lightweight," one remarked. She simply met his gaze, nodded once, and replied, "Yes, Sergeant." By the end of the first week, she performed extra jumps, assisting trainees who froze at the exit. Her parachute control was flawless, not showy, just precise. Each time her boots hit the ground, she'd murmur, "One more done." She never celebrated, never complained. This rhythm became her essence. Within 5 years, Staff Sergeant Torres completed 2 combat tours, first in Afghanistan, then Iraq. Not as a frontline fighter but as a communications specialist. The silent anchor preventing chaos. Her team called her Raven, not for mystery, but for unwavering dependability. Ravens don't stray, they always find their way home, no matter the storm. Raven spoke little but perceived everything. The faulty antenna on the JTAC's radio before a mission. The slight signal delay when crossing grid lines. The tremor in a medic's hands before a dawn patrol. She absorbed every detail as if it were air. Her watch strap bore tiny ink markings on its inner leather. Coordinates, survival directions, escape routes, each smudged but perfectly memorized. Her gear always included a small utility knife, its handle smooth from constant use. She sharpened it weekly, a precise ritual. And when maps were laid out for briefings, she was the one who flattened their edges before folding them with surgical exactness. Northrop creases impeccable. Her squad mates would tease, "Raven, did you iron those maps too?" She'd offer a slight smirk. "Only if you want them to fit in your pocket." What distinguished her wasn't just discipline, it was restraint. While others lost their tempers or boasted loudly, Maya remained composed. During firefights, her voice was the calmest on the radio. When a Humvee flipped after hitting an IED, she was the one crawling into the smoke to pull out the driver. Eyes burning, orders clear. Yet despite all this, she was consistently underestimated. Some saw her height first, not her. Some saw her plain brown eyes, not the decade of service behind them. Even during joint operations, wearing civilian clothes to blend with intelligence teams, people assumed she was support staff, logistics, admin, anyone but combat trained. It didn't bother her, it sharpened her focus. She understood something most didn't. Underestimation is effective camouflage. Months before the desert incident, one night her composure became legendary within her unit. A new recruit, Private Huxley, was assigned to her comms section. His first mission was at a forward operating base, near Kandahar. Nerves were frayed, radios jammed. Mortar rounds echoed just beyond the perimeter. Huxley's hands shook as he struggled with a frequency dial. Maya slid next to him, as calm as a gentle rain. "Hey," she said softly. "Breathe first, fix later." He blinked, surprised. "What if we lose the connection?" She took the handset, adjusted the knob 3 clicks to the right, and the channel instantly sprang to life. A pilot's voice cutting through the static. "There," she stated. "Now we don't lose anything." Later, when the lieutenant asked who stabilized the network, Huxley pointed to her. "Raven did," he confirmed. She didn't even seem afraid. Maya merely smiled. There was no time for fear. Soon after, a sealed black envelope circulated. An invitation-only selection, not a course, not a transfer but a demanding test. 3 words topped the page: assessment and selection. She spoke of it to no one. She packed lightly, left a voicemail for her sister, "Be good, Lena, I'll be back when I can," and vanished for 4 months. When she returned, her uniform showed no new badges, but the men who had endured it with her understood what her silence meant. Those who hadn't, didn't dare ask. A captain found her later in the mess hall, and quietly asked, "You made it, didn't you?" She simply raised an eyebrow. He nodded. "Yeah, I thought so." From that day on, no one called her Staff Sergeant Torres, unless it was official. To her team she was Raven, the woman who never wavered, never boasted, never broke. Years later, the mission in northern Mexico began, a quiet operation to rescue a kidnapped American advisor. Maya had served for over a decade. Her movements were automatic, her discipline ingrained, her belief simple: no one is coming to save you, you save each other. This belief was about to face its ultimate test. The convoy traveled south on a rough track, called a road mostly out of necessity for maps. 2 unmarked SUVs led, followed by a battered Tacoma carrying a spare tire and water, and finally a Land Cruiser where Maya sat in the back. Windows were coated in dust, the air thick with stifling heat. Their plan was straightforward: slip in before noon, extract the advisor from a safe house near a dry riverbed, and exit before the afternoon heat turned the sky into shimmering glass. No fanfare, no heroics, no traceable action. Maya rode in silence, headset fitted, her eyes on a well-used map resting on her knee. She traced a finger along a pencil line, a narrow drain, a livestock gate, then a split, where the path narrowed into thorny brush. 2 minutes to target, the driver mumbled. Up ahead, smoke drifted across the track. At first, it seemed like a brush fire. Then distinct shapes emerged: 3 tires burning in a scattered pattern, and a rust-eaten sedan blocking the way. "Roadblock," the lead SUV radioed. "We'll push through." "Negative," the team leader responded. "We'll go left through the wash. Bypass it. Slow and smart." Maya felt a prickle of unease. Burning tires were just a diversion. The real danger lay hidden. "Hold," she said quietly. "Check the ditch 10 meters ahead. That dirt looks too fresh." The driver hit the brake. Dust billowed like ocean spray. Through the windshield, Maya observed a stretch of road that had been smoothed by hand, not by wind. Her thumb brushed the inside of her watch strap, a tiny ink direction marking a concealed spot. Back up, she stated slowly. They reversed 3 meters when the world exploded around them. A powerful blast lifted the front SUV, as if an unseen hand had struck it. The windshield shattered into glittering fragments. The Tacoma swerved, its rear gate crashing into a mesquite tree. Maya's head snapped against the headrest. Her chest radio crackled with static. Contact! Contact! Front! Brake! Brake! Someone yelled. Then the gunfire erupted. A sustained, tearing sound from the right, heavier than an AK, perhaps an RPK or PKM, belt-fed. The roadblock was the true ambush was arranged in an L shape, down in the gully to their right, and along an embankment to their left, ready to devastate the kill zone. Smoke out, the team leader ordered. White clouds from grenades puffed up, useless, in the intense heat. Maya's awareness sharpened to 3 critical facts. Shooters on the left, positioned high behind tires. Shooters on the right, low in the wash, and the ditch charge was triggered by a wire, not a remote, because the detonation followed their break too quickly. She shoved the Land Cruiser door open and dropped to the sand, heat searing, grit biting her teeth. Comms check, she spoke into her microphone. Huxley status. Hit, I'm hit, Corporal Huxley rasped. Left forearm. I can still operate. Stay with me, Maya instructed. Push our transmissions to the backup network. Encryption might be compromised. Bullets hissed through dry grass near her boot. Someone in the gully spotted her headset and fired a burst, aiming to take her out. She crawled behind a tire rut, knelt and took a quick assessing glance. Not greedy. 10, maybe 12 shooters in total. 2 vehicles behind them that hadn't been there moments ago. A Humvee and a Silverado, with mounted gun racks in their beds. Left embankment, 2 with belt feds, she called out. Right gully, 3 with rifles. 1 spot. The team leader tried to get the lead SUV moving. It groaned, radiator hissing. A second blast tore into the road where their rear tires had been moments before. Not as powerful, more a blocking charge than a killing one. They were trapped. Voices jabbered rapid Spanish from the embankment. Then something new. A clear English voice on their frequency that didn't belong. U.S. soldiers, it declared, as cheerful as a radio host. Drop your weapons and step out. We only want to talk. Maya felt a chill despite the heat. They weren't jamming. They'd seized a handset and infiltrated their network. She switched to the backup frequency and tapped twice. The pre-arranged signal indicating compromised communications. Only static and breathing return. Raven, the team leader said. Now closer, his sleeve dark with someone's blood. We need a way out. She scanned left flank too exposed, right gully too deep, the rear now blocked by the sideways Tacoma. Our only escape is through the gully. On me, she announced. They moved, low and tight, a 3-person team heading towards the wash. Rounds buzzed low like angry insects. Maya mentally counted the pattern, 3-second bursts, 4-second pause, belt change at 6. She tossed a smoke grenade into the gully and dropped in after it, landing hard on her palms, sand scraping her skin. For a moment the world went silent. Smoke, grit, a bright drop of blood on the back of her hand. Then a figure charged into the smoke towards her, a man with a bandana and a short rifle. He saw a small soldier, not a trained operative. He lunged to grab her, elbow flashed. A precise, swift strike that jammed his weapon across his own chest. Her boot found his knee, sending him crumpling. She didn't finish him. Time was life. Hux, crawl, she commanded. Stay in the ditch. They slid 30 meters along the gully and were almost to a dip, when the Silverado appeared above them, bracing its wheels at the edge, churning dirt. Muzzle flashes winked. Back, Maya yelled. A rope snaked down from the truck bed. Not a rescue but a drag. Hands grabbed it. Maya twisted, kicked, reaching for Hux. The rope tightened around his boot, yanking him forward into the open like a fish. No, Maya lunged, her fingers brushing his pant leg. Bullets cracked around them. She let him go. It was the hardest choice of her life. Gunfire subsided,
replaced by shouts. Dark figures spread out around the gully. 3 rifles pressed down on Maya. 2 more on the team leader. Hux lay face down, dust mixing with blood on his forearm. He twitched, trying to roll, but a boot pinned him. "Drop," someone ordered. "Drop your gear now." Maya slowly lowered her rifle. She felt the metal's heat through her glove. Her fingers ached to clench. To fight and die right then. She wouldn't allow it. They bound her wrists, ripped off her headset, and forced her to her knees. The men's faces were young and sunburnt. Their laughter sounded ancient. A man with mirrored sunglasses crouched to peer into her eyes. "Granjita," he said lightly. "You speak." She didn't answer. He tore her name tape free and tossed it into the sand. Another ripped off her rank. A third found her dog tags, tugged in when they wouldn't break, cut the chain, flinging the tags into the brush. "Delta," a fourth stated, savoring the word like a movie title. "You do karate?" "Yes." "You leap from helicopters." Laughter burst like oil in a hot pan. A boot nudged her shoulder. "Where is your courage now?" Another pointed at her small frame and sneered. "So tiny, not scary. We thought soldiers were big." A young gunman with a skull tattoo leaned close enough for her to smell stale cigarette smoke. "You know how this goes," he whispered. "We ask you tell, or we teach you to tell." Maya looked at him saying nothing. Her gaze remained steady. She didn't take his bait. Her pulse slowed, not quickened. They took her plate carrier, sidearm, radio, GPS. They stripped her of everything that made modern warfare feel secure. The humiliation was layered. Not just theft, but a cruel performance. One held up her small knife, wagging it as if it were a toy prize. Another pretended to read her folded map upside down, the crowd roaring with amusement. They shoved Hux under the truck's shadow and tied a clumsy cloth strip around his arm. He groaned, his eyes fluttering. "Raven," he rasped weakly. "I'm sorry." She shook her head once. "Stay awake," she murmured. "You hear me? Stay awake."
The lieutenant arrived last, as such men always do, only after the display was ready. Clean boots, a cool smile, and a pistol that never jammed because someone else cleaned it. "American soldiers," he said in polished English. "Welcome to Sonora." He studied Maya. "No," he corrected himself. "American, what is the word? Special. Elite." He savored the syllable like a grape on his tongue. "Delta." He squatted, examining her like a mechanic checking a part. "You look ordinary," he said, almost disappointed. "I thought the best were tall with big muscles like on TV." The men chuckled. He glanced towards the road where the lead SUV still smoked. "Your radio," he continued. "It speaks Spanish now. We borrowed the voice." He smiled. "You will tell us what we want, then perhaps we'll let you rest in the shade." He snapped his fingers. 2 men dragged Maya by her arms to the back of the Helix. They dropped her like a sack. A third climbed in, pressing a boot on her shoulder to hold her down. She lifted her head, meeting Hux's pale eyes beneath the truck. She held his gaze. "Breathe," she mouthed. "In," she mouthed. "Out." The lieutenant gestured. Engines sputtered to life. The small convoy turned east, towards the hazy outline of low mountains where their compound was hidden. The drive was scorching. Heat blasted through the wind. Grit grated against her teeth. They joked loudly to pass the miles. "Hey, Delta," one said. "Do you fly drones from your bedroom?" Another dangled her dog tags, then flung them into the desert like confetti. A third leaned close and tapped her forehead. Hollow. Nothing inside. None of it bothered her. She had endured worse in quieter rooms, from men in uniforms who never bled. Instead, she kept track of time. Truck speed at 40, sometimes 50. A sharp left turn after 23 minutes. A creek bed crossed at 27, tires crunching dry stones. A solitary saguaro with a broken arm at 39 minutes. She drew the mental map, adding it to her internal library. At the compound, brick walls emerged from the dust. A corrugated gate shrieked on worn hinges. Children of the men flicked cigarette butts and stared. Dogs barked. Then, sensing something in the air, fell silent. They dragged the captives into a courtyard where a tarp provided thin shade. They separated Maya, letting Hux slump against a wall. They placed a plastic chair beside him, as if mercy could be bought with furniture. An older man with a scar through his eyebrow stepped forward, holding a notepad. Names, he demanded. Units. Frequencies. How many more are coming? He spoke Spanish, waiting as if she would reply in kind. Maya took one deep breath. Her wrists ached under the restraints. She accepted the pain. No, she stated simply in English. The first slap surprised her, mostly because it was lazy. He didn't hit like a soldier. He hit like a man who believed violence worked on its own. She tasted blood and continued counting. Try again, he ordered. She did. They removed her blouse, checking for tattoos that might reveal a story. They found the small raven silhouette behind her left ear. The older man snorted. Ah, he said. A little bird. It flies home. One of the younger men remarked. Another mimed wings and cackled until a more serious companion silenced him with a glare. They filmed it all. The questions. The silence for their own spectacle. Maya met the camera lens, not letting hatred sharpen her eyes but allowing emptiness to float there. When her silence wore them down, they shifted targets. They crouched near Hux, asking him everything. Anything. In a tone that promised relief, as if kindness were currency. He tried to resist. Pain began to fray the edges of his refusal. Hey! Maya's voice cut across their questions, low and steady as a metronome. Breathe. Hux. That's an order. He clung to her words like a drowning man to a rope. The lieutenant drifted back in, bored with other matters. He tilted his head. You seem to know how long a man lasts, out here, he commented, approaching Maya. In the sun without water. He smiled. We will discover. He made a small hand gesture. Two men pulled Maya to her feet. She stumbled, her knees weak from hours on the ground, then forced her legs to stand firm. They walked her past a table where a rifle had been cleaned, its bolt incorrectly reassembled, past a wall where an upside-down map hung, thumbtacks scattered like flies, past a corner where a radio sat, tuned to a frequency she knew intimately. She didn't diverge. She didn't grab. She learned. Outside the gate, the sun felt like a punishment. The lieutenant gestured to the horizon. Miles of shimmering emptiness. 80 kilometers, he said pleasantly. Civilization, if you can call it that. He nodded to the guard. Give her a head start, he added, almost kindly. Then we'll see how far she crawls. They threw her into the back of a pickup and drove until the compound was a distant blur. They stopped where the land opened up like a gaping maw. He tossed 2 water bottles into the sand, just out of reach, the way cruel men do when they want to pretend they're being fair. He looked down at her. You, Delta Force, he said, his teeth stark white in the sun's glare. Let's see how tough you are without water. The men laughed, a hollow sound in the bright expanse. They cut the ties on her ankles, leaving her wrists bound. They drove off, kicking up a spray of dirt. Silence descended with a thud. The desert, as it always did, ignored her. Maya rolled onto her side, spat out dust, and listened to the engines fade. 5 seconds, 10, 15. Then she pulled her knees under her and sat up. Her mind worked quietly, precisely. The sun was high, leaning west. Mid-afternoon, she estimated. Peak heat still to come. She catalogued the landscape. Low creosote bushes, scattered ocotillos, a dry gully sloping south like a line in a palm. She checked her wrists. The zip tie bit deeply, her pulse throbbing against the plastic. She didn't fight it yet. She closed her eyes and took one slow breath, just as she'd taught Hux. Opening them, she gazed east towards the mountains, and the compound holding her team. What would you do if you were in Maya's situation? Would you run blindly, dying proudly? Would you break, begging for mercy, only to die slowly? Maya did what Delta Selection's first unspoken lesson teaches. She chose the third option. She slid onto her side until her back pressed against the scorching sand. The heat bit, then steady. She inched her wrists along the grit, sawing the plastic against quartz until she felt a catch, and the tie scraped a fraction. No panic, just procedure.
A vulture circled high, a dark speck against the harsh blue sky. The horizon wavered. She licked her lips, tasting dust, and smiled without humor. "They think I'm alone," she whispered. She tilted her head, observing the wind's patterns on the sand, marking a faint crease, the line where night would bring cool air into the gully. She had hours to endure, and a single plan to build. "Tell us, would you try to fight back immediately, or wait for a smarter move? Comment below." The first hour alone taught Maya that silence could scream. Every breath rasped against dry air that tasted of salt and copper. Yet beneath the heat, haze, and thirst, her mind stayed methodical. She crawled toward the low draw that cut through the desert like a scar. There, under the thin shade of a creosote bush, she paused to breathe, slow and measured. Her wrists throbbed where the zip tie dug grooves into the skin. She rotated them a fraction, feeling the plastic heat, memorizing its give. As she shifted, the wind brushed back a strand of hair. For a second, the tiny raven tattoo behind her left ear caught the light. She touched it once, lightly, almost without thinking. The ink had been earned years ago on a freezing night in the Carolina pines, the end of a selection phase where 20 had started, and 6 had finished. The instructors had told them, "You're not immortal, you're adaptable." That memory, small and dark as the tattoo itself, steadied her. She scanned the horizon again. Heat shimmer bent the line of mountains, tricking distance into mirage. Somewhere east, a faint black dot moved. The cartel truck returning to its compound. She noted its bearing and filed it away. Her throat burned. She dug her fingers into the sand, found it still damp an inch below the surface. She pressed that moisture against her tongue. Bitter, metallic, but enough to tell her which direction the water table leaned. When she shifted her right arm, a faint sting lit along the forearm. The skin there carried a faded scab, puckered, and white. 2 years earlier, a survival dive in frigid water had nearly killed her. She lost consciousness beneath ice, saved only because a teammate yanked her free by the harness. The wound never healed clean, and the scar reminded her what panic caused. Now she traced it, the pulse beneath skin slowing back to rhythm. She used the memory like a switch. Fear off, focus on. She turned her body sideways to the sun, studying how her shadow shortened. She estimated 1 hour until peak, 3 until decline, enough to move at dusk. Enough to... Her fingertips brushed her pants pocket, and there it was, the thing they had missed. A folded photograph, edges soft and sand-worn. She unfolded it carefully. Lena, her younger sister, smiling in a cheap graduation gown, a desert flower pinned to her hair. Behind her, the bleachers of a Tucson high school. Maya exhaled. "Still waiting for me to come home, she murmured. The paper trembled in the wind. She refolded it, tucked it deep again. A tiny anchor to a world where people laughed under blue skies. Far off, engines caught. A thin dust column rose. The cartel returning to check the kill zone, maybe scavenge equipment. She flattened herself and let the bush cover her outline. A voice drifted across the air. Spanish, half sung, half shouted. Then silence again. Minutes later, boots crunched. 2 guards, just kids, sweeping the area. They weren't careful. They were bored. One carried a small speaker on his hip, playing ranchera music through static. The other hummed a soldier's cadence under his breath. Wrong tempo, lazy rhythm. When they paused near her bush, Maya began to hum. Too soft it barely carried, yet patterned a 6-count marching cadence, in a border dialect of Spanish, one used in Delta SERE escape drills years ago. Each phrase encoded a simple message: direction east, safe nightfall. One of the guards tilted his head, frowning. "Did you hear something?" he asked. The other laughed. "Just the wind, hermano. Even the ghosts hum here." They moved on. Maya kept the tune going, until the sound of the truck swallowed. Somewhere beyond hearing, a captured ally might pick it up later. Or maybe not. Either way, she had left a mark, an invisible flare of intention. She let her body sink into stillness again, rationing motion the way others rationed water. Every few minutes, She flexed fingers to keep blood moving, tapping a slow code against the zip tie. Patience, timing, patience. The desert answered with heat and cicadas. By late afternoon the light turned copper. Shadows stretched long across the flats. Maya watched them like clock hands. When one shadow touched the edge of her makeshift trench, she whispered, "Move." She rolled to her knees, braced her wrists against a stone edge, and twisted. The plastic creaked but held. She repositioned, rubbed the tie against a quartz shard again. Another millimeter gave. Sweat dripped from her chin and hissed on the rock. She paused, forcing a breath. Her chest ached from shallow breathing. A flash memory surfaced. The instructor's voice during selection week. When you think you're dying, count 4 things you can see, 3 you can touch, 2 you can smell, 1 you can control. She obeyed. She saw the sun bleeding toward horizon, the glint of distant metal, her own knees caked in dust. A single hawk circling high. She touched sand, stone, plastic. She smelled heat, sweat, oil, and she controlled herself. The tie finally snapped with a dry pop. Relief didn't flood her. She simply flexed fingers once, testing joints. Then she rubbed her wrists until feeling returned. No blood, only swelling. She scavenged the ground for anything usable. A sharp tin scrap, maybe from the truck's tailgate, went into her pocket. A boot track showed tread heading northeast. She memorized pattern and direction. It would help at night. Dusk crawled in. She rose slowly, stretching cramped legs. Her knees trembled once, then steadied. The desert cooled by degrees. Each breath hurt less. She started east, following the faint dip of the land. Every few steps, she paused, listening. Nightbirds began to stir. The sound meant insects nearby, water not far. A distant dog barked. Voices echoed thinly. The cartel miles behind, laughing over something unseen. The world felt both infinite and fragile. She walked until the first star appeared. Then she crouched under an overhang of rock and sat. For the first time since capture, she allowed herself to whisper into the darkness. "You were wrong, Lieutenant," she said softly. "Delta doesn't teach us to be tough. It teaches us not to quit." The wind shifted, carrying the scent of dust and mesquite. Somewhere to the south, a faint rhythmic thump repeated. 2, even for a random sound. Maybe a generator, maybe a heartbeat of the place she had to reach. She pressed her palm to her ear, feeling the tiny raven shape there, warm from the day's sun. Each clue she carried, the tattoo, the scar, the photograph, wasn't decoration. They were reminders of process, of reasons to endure. When fatigue threatened to pull her down, she took out the photo again. She let the fading light outline Lena's smile and whispered, "Still watching the sunrise for me, kid." Then she tucked it away, stood and began moving toward the mountain. The desert around her glowed dull silver, alive with unseen motion. Coyotes barked far off. The horizon pulsed with hidden fire. She walked into it, a ghost made of patience. The desert night had teeth. By midnight the temperature had fallen from burning to bone-cutting cold, and every breath Maya drew felt like inhaling glass. Her wrists were raw, the freed skin bright against the starlight. But pain meant life. She reminded herself of that with every movement. She'd freed one. It wasn't victory. It was permission to think bigger. She lay flat in the hollow of a wash, the kind carved by flash floods that came once a year, and then vanished. Sand gritted her teeth, stuck to her sweat-soaked collar. She flexed her right hand, the one she'd freed by pulling a single thread from the hem of her uniform. A fine sharp filament she'd once used to repair comm wires in the field, wrapped around her finger. It had sliced through the plastic tie, grain by grain, until she'd heard the faintest. She didn't move immediately. Movement got you killed. Stillness let you think. The stars above were hard points of ice. She could make out the Big Dipper, the faint smear of the Milky Way, and low on the horizon, the dim flicker of orange. A campfire. The cartel compound. 80 kilometers. She repeated it in her head like a march cadence. At dawn, the wind shifted again. The heat returned faster than she expected. A reminder that rest here was theft. You stole it in slivers and the desert always noticed. Maya checked her pocket again. The folded photograph of Lena was still there, edges curled, her sister's smile ghost-like, now under a smear of dust. She tucked it away, the motion automatic. Habit replaced comfort. When she rose to her knees, she scanned the horizon with slow precision. The ground shimmered, but the patterns of shadow and dune told her something. Under the far ridge, the sand compacted darker, harder soil. That meant there had once been water there, maybe an old washline that still held morning dew, or sparse mesquite. Her lips cracked when she smiled. Dew meant life. Life meant movement.
But she wasn't the only one breathing this desert. Near sunrise, the distant sound of an engine broke the quiet. It wasn't the deep growl of a convoy. It was a lighter, higher-pitched rattle. A dirt bike, maybe two. Patrol. She flattened herself into the wash, pressing her cheek into cool grit. The bikes grew louder, the engines hiccuping through gears bouncing over the dunes. Then silence. She heard laughter and the thump of boots. The guards weren't searching, they were bored, killing time on rotation. They stopped near the old truck she'd been dumped from. She could hear their voices through the stillness, Spanish laced with that border slang she'd learned years ago. One of them kicked the tailgate. Still here. Guess the birds ate her. The other laughed. Or she dug herself into the sand. The first dropped into the bed, rattling metal. Something fell. A piece of equipment. Heavy. Solid. A radio. Its casing dented but still intact. Maya's heart ticked once. She waited. The men climbed out, cursing at the heat. Then started their bikes again and roared away in a spray of dust. When the sound faded, the radio lay half buried near the wheel track. She slid toward it on her elbows, every shift of her body deliberate, silent. She reached out, pulled it close, brushed off the sand. The casing was cracked, the antenna gone, but the power light still flickered faint red when she pressed the toggle. She turned the volume dial. Static whispered, faint, but alive. Then she flipped the frequency knob one notch at a time, listening for any fragment that might be her team. Nothing. Only the hiss of endless airwaves. Her fingers tightened. She knew she couldn't transmit. There'd be no range, no line of sight, and any attempt might alert the wrong ears. But Delta training wasn't about talking louder. It was about saying more with less. She picked up a shard of metal from the truck's fender, a triangle of rusted chrome. Using its edge, she tapped twice on the radio's casing, then 3 quick taps on the truck bed, then one long scrape. Tap, 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 scrape. To anyone else it was nothing but the wind playing with junk. To anyone who'd survived Delta selection, it was a pre-arranged signal pattern. SERE code. Alive. Eastbound. Tracking. She did it again. Slower. Embedding it in the steel. Then she waited. Half a kilometer away at the compound, the faint metallic echo carried just enough for a guard to pause mid-cigarette and glance toward the dunes. "ISO," he muttered. His partner shrugged. "Probably the wind. This place makes noises." But the lieutenant inside the compound noticed the tension ripple through his men. "Check it," he ordered lazily. "If it's nothing, you run laps." The guards grumbled, but obeyed. 2 of them grabbed rifles and started out toward the wash. Maya saw their silhouettes crest the ridge. 2 figures, rifles slung low, casual. She didn't panic. Instead, she shifted her position slightly, pressing her freed hand into the sand and dragging her other, still bound wrist close enough to reach the edge of the quartz shard she'd hit. A small movement. One goal. Finish what she'd started. The zip tie snapped just as the first guard shouted, "Not a key." Maya froze, wrist free. The men scanned lazily, then turned back, their laughter fading with the crunch of boots. She let her body relax only when they disappeared over the rise. Her breath left in a silent exhale. With both hands free, she moved fast. First priority shade. Using the truck's broken tailgate and a sheet of half-buried tarp, she created a shallow lean-to against the wind. Under it, the temperature dropped enough to breathe again. Then she turned to her next task, the wounded. Through her binocular focus, she'd seen movement near the compound earlier, a flash of uniform tan under the tarp by the fence. Hucks, If he was still alive, she had to reach him. But charging back blind would undo everything. She spent an hour crawling the wash, tracing how the sand packed. Where it felt firmest under her palm, she found cracked salt and bits of dry reed. The ghost of a water channel that meant dew at dawn. She marked the spot with 3 stones shaped like an arrow. Navigation doesn't need GPS, she muttered. Just pattern. When night came again, she moved back toward the compound perimeter. Her stomach ached from emptiness. Her throat was parchment, but her head stayed clear. She remembered the map she'd built in her mind. The left wall broke. A small outbuilding near the generator shed. A dog tethered near the east gate. The dog was her biggest threat. Noise, not bullets, betrayed you first. So she crouched 50 meters out, hiding low behind a mesquite bush, and waited until the wind carried from the opposite direction. When it did, she slid forward inch by inch, using the dips in the terrain as cover. Every sound mattered. The hum of the generator, the murmur of voices, the creak of a chair. Her pulse matched the rhythm. Then luck. A distracted guard left his post to argue over a radio call. His rifle hung loose, safety off. He dropped a map as he turned, a folded sheet that fluttered against the sand. Maya moved before thought caught up. She crawled, snatched the map and froze as a cigarette ember arced through the dark, landing yards from her. The guard cursed softly, too drunk to notice. She unfolded the paper under the moonlight. It wasn't detailed, but it showed what mattered. Routes, supply convoys, water caches, and at the top corner, a note in crude Spanish. Well, 3 active, a water source. Her pulse quickened. It wasn't just escape now, it was survival, maybe even rescue. She memorized every mark, every contour, then tucked the paper inside her boot. Back at her lean-to, she sat cross-legged and listened to the desert breathe. The compound glowed faintly in the distance. Occasionally, a single shot echoed, aimless guards showing off to each other. But inside that noise, she heard something else, a rhythm. Tap, 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 tap. Pause. Tap. Her breath caught. It wasn't random. Someone was answering. She leaned forward, straining. The pattern repeated, fainter now but deliberate. It was Delta's variant of Morse code received. Hold position. Hux was alive. Maybe not alone. Maya pressed her forehead to the rusted fender, whispering a thank you into the metal. Hours later, just before dawn, she worked. Using her knife shard, she cut strips from the tarp and wrapped her wrists. Part bandage, part disguise. The rest of the tarp she tore into cords. She used one to drag the radio under the shade, then stripped its wire coil. She wrapped the coil around a steel peg from the truck's frame, improvised antenna. She couldn't broadcast far, but if her timing matched the convoy frequency she'd overheard earlier, maybe, just maybe, the Americans monitoring border chatter would catch the distortion. She twisted the knob to 400E5 700, tapped the casing again. Raven alive. Delta code 8 north, east. Static hiss. No reply. She tried again. Tap, 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 tap. Scrape. Somewhere miles away a satellite feed might flicker or not. It didn't matter. The act itself mattered. That's what survival training drilled into you. Signal even when no one listens, because silence kills faster than bullets. As the first light bled across the horizon, a shout cracked from the compound. Guards ran toward the perimeter, rifles up. A truck started revving hard. Maya crouched low, heart steady, but mind racing. Something had spooked them. She didn't know the full chain yet, but her small actions had built it. The missing map, the echoing taps, the unease in their ranks. Someone thought a rescue force was near. She could almost hear her instructor's voice again. Small moves make big ripples. Raven, don't aim to win, aim to tilt the board. The board was tilting now. Through her binocular vision, she saw the lieutenant pacing, shouting orders, waving his pistol. He pointed toward the east hills, the same direction she'd mapped as her route. Perfect. While his men ran that way, she slipped the other. By midday she was 5 kilometers from the compound. Every muscle burned. She paused only once, kneeling beside a patch of cracked earth, where the night's dew had pooled in tiny drops along the roots of mesquite. She pressed her bandaged hand to the dirt, scooped what she could into her mouth.
It wasn't water, it was salvation. From that vantage, she saw the smoke column twisting above the compound. Confusion, fear. She had become their ghost story, and in that chaos, maybe just maybe, her team would get a window to break free. She touched the raven tattoo once more, eyes half closed. Lesson 1, she whispered, never waste pain. Then she turned east into the glare, carrying only a map, a shard of metal, and the sound of the signal still echoing in her head. Did you see how she used nothing to make something happen? Night came down like a curtain, heavy and deliberate. Heat bled from the ground in waves. In the distance, the cartel compound glowed dull amber, a cluster of lights in an ocean of dark. Maya slid along the spine of a low ridge, until she could see over the wall. She lay on her stomach, chin in sand, rifle absent, breath measured. She didn't need a weapon to change her room. She needed timing. Inside, a generator coughed. A radio scratched. Men argued in half whispers. The bravado of daylight muted to the practical fear of night. A dog lifted its head, ears pricked, then tucked its muzzle back under a paw. Even the dog had learned silence. Maya tracked the patrol pattern. 2 men at the east gate, 1 lazy loop along the wall every 7 minutes. A smoker who wandered to the same corner and flicked ash like a lighthouse signal. On the 3rd cycle she ghosted down the slope, keeping the mesquite between herself and the light. She reached the wall's shadow, and put her back to the rough brick. Her fingers found a chipped vertical seam, a foothold. She breathed once and went up, a slow, quiet rise, until her eyes just cleared the lip. The courtyard below had shifted since daylight. A folding table now sat beneath the tarp. A laptop, a scuffed PDA cabled to a portable drive. The older interrogator was there, the one with the scarred brow, scrolling through files with a clumsy hand. Beside him, Lieutenant Vargas paced, the same lazy smile stretched too thin. Where are the others? The older man said without looking up. In the shed, Vargas replied. They say nothing. The girl, she is, how do they say, a problem for tomorrow. The older man clicked a file. The laptop screen flashed a grid of thumbnails, photos, names, briefs in English and Spanish. He leaned closer. There, a candid shot taken at some dusty airstrip years ago. A woman in a camouflage cap, face half shadowed, mouth relaxed, eyes unreadable. On the brim, someone had scrawled a call sign in Sharpie. Raven. The older man stilled. His finger hovered over the trackpad. Aspera, he whispered. Wait. Vargas stopped pacing. What? The older man turned the laptop so the light hit the photo full. Lines around his eyes deepened. He had the look of a man who had survived one too many rumors. I know this story, he said softly. Not from TV, from men, contractors. They spoke about a woman who passed a certain selection, then disappeared. Not dead, not alive, just gone where men like us do not go. He tapped the screen. This is her. Vargas laughed, but the sound died halfway. His eyes flicked reflexively to the wall, to the dark beyond the lights. You are saying what? She is some kind of myth. The older man didn't answer. He clicked another image, a grainy still from a drone. A woman dragging a wounded soldier behind a burned-out vehicle, her body shielded by smoke. No face, just motion. Below the caption, Raven activity unconfirmed. A murmur went around the yard. Cigarettes slowed, boots stopped scuffing the dust. Men who'd done violence for a living looked at a small rectangle of light and saw something they did not control. At the far side of the yard, under a corrugated awning, Hux lay against a post, eyes half closed. He heard the word like a rope thrown across water. Rave. He swallowed, blood tacky at his lip. His fingers twitched once. He turned his head toward the gate, toward the night. Raven, he whispered. A breath more than a sound. She's here. No one heard him but himself. It was enough. On the wall, Maya held the edge of brick and watched the recognition spread like a slow fire. She didn't smile. She didn't move. She let the room teach itself. The older man dragged a hand over his jaw. He lowered his voice as if speaking of a superstition. There is a thing they say in the north, he told Vargas without looking up, about their selection. It breaks you, then it builds the part that does not break again. Vargas flicked his gaze at the gate a second time. The smile faltered. Stories. He tried for a shrug and found only a shiver. From the shadows by the shed, one of the mercenaries stepped closer. Older than the rest. Foreign. His gear didn't match the cartel's piecemeal loadouts. He had the stance of a man who had been trained to. He took a slow breath. Eyes on the laptop. Then on the wall. I saw her once, he said. His accent hinted at Eastern Europe. Years back. Dust storm so bad you could drink the air. We heard rumors of a woman who got a team out when everything went to hell. They said she didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. The men around her, they just moved. The yard tightened. The dog stood now, hackles up, but silent. Vargas forced a laugh a third time, and the sound fractured like glass. You are afraid of a ghost, he said. Very good. Then the ghost can answer questions in the morning. He turned to the shed to signal an underling. He never finished the gesture. A pebble ticked off the metal roof of the outbuilding. Then another small nothing. Unless you knew to listen. Tap, 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 tap. Scrape. The mercenary's head snapped toward the gate. His face went still. He breathed one word in a language no one else there knew. It meant incoming truth. Maya slid down to the ground outside the wall and moved to the gate's hinge line, where shadow pulled darkest. Through the slats, she saw the whole scene. Men stuck between laughter and legend. She stepped into the light like it wasn't there. No shout, no sprint, just a single pace into the threshold, so that when the guard turned, he saw her in profile. Dust on her face, hair tucked, wrists wrapped in torn tarp, eyes level. The cigarette in his mouth paused mid-arc. His jaw didn't close. The ember fell and died. Maya didn't look at him. She looked past him, through him to the lieutenant. Vargas, midway to a command, froze. The gesture collapsing at the elbow. His mouth opened. The part of his face that did most of his talking suddenly forgot how. He stared at her like a man seeing a shape in fog resolve into something with a name he'd mocked, and now believed. No one spoke. Even the generator seemed to wait. A single dog barked once, and then, as if corrected by an invisible hand, stopped. Maya didn't raise her chin. She didn't flash a patch or spit a speech. She let the tiny raven tattoo behind her left ear catch the light for half a second, as she turned her head. That was all. The older mercenary drew in air like a man who'd been underwater too long. He set his rifle's muzzle toward the ground. Not surrender, not threat. A soldier's neutral. He nodded once, small to a truth only he and a few others in that yard could see. Vargas swallowed, his pistol lowered from habit, not intent. He forced sound through a dry throat. You are. The older interrogator saved him from finishing. He closed the laptop with a gentle click, like putting a lid on a story that had become too real to read aloud. We should not make jokes anymore, he said quietly. A breeze cut the courtyard. Ash skittered across concrete. No one moved. Under the awning, Hux lifted his head. Pain made his voice thin, but hope put steel in it. Raven, he whispered again, louder, eyes finding her in the gate's shadow. It's Raven. The word crossed the courtyard and reached ears that did not want it and could not refuse it. Maya let it land. She watched it change posture, and hands and breathing. She watched men remember things they'd heard in half-true stories of land navigation, in blacked-out forests, of rocks so heavy they made your spine sing, of days where instructors spoke in riddles, and nights where the only miracle was getting back on your feet. Delta was not magic. It was memory of pain endured, of clarity chosen, and these men, even if they'd never been near such a place, recognized the shape of it in the way she stood. A boy with a skull tattoo broke first. He tried a laugh and found it stuck. He reached for bravado, and came up with a question instead. What do we do, Chefe? He asked Vargas without taking his eyes off Maya. Vargas did not answer. He was remembering his own lines from the afternoon. Water, sun, bones. The script sounded foolish in his head now. A movie in the wrong language. Maya stepped one pace deeper into the light, not rushing it, not taking more than the room would give. Her gaze touched each face as if she were counting them off for a manifest. She stopped at Hux. For the first time something like warmth showed in her eye. Breathe, she said softly, and the word carried the memory of a radio set, coming clear after hard static. He obeyed as if it were oxygen. When she looked back to Vargas, her voice didn't rise. "You made a mistake," she said. "You thought equipment made a soldier. You were wrong." Silence absorbed the words and did not spit them out. The older mercenary shifted his feet, squared his shoulders, and then, so small a motion it almost wasn't, he straightened his spine and dipped his head. Respect, not surrender. Recognition, not fear. Others followed with echoes of the gesture. It wasn't choreography, it was relief that the story in the laptop had a face, and the face had rules. Soldiers understand rules. Vargas broke the spell by breathing too loud. He tried to smooth his hair with the hand that held the pistol, and looked ridiculous. "Take her," he started, but even his men didn't move with conviction. The room was no longer his. Maya didn't press the advantage. She let the balance tip itself. Then she said the smallest thing with the largest consequence. "Night's not done," she said. "Think carefully about what side you're on when morning comes." It landed like a verdict. In the dark beyond the light, someone tapped metal once. A patient, familiar rhythm. Tap, 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 tap. Scrape. Every man who mattered heard it, and understood that whatever they chose now would be recorded on more than a hard drive. Hux exhaled. His eyes shone. "Raven," he said, steadier, as if saying it made it true twice. Maya let the name be the last sound. She didn't claim it. She didn't have to. The courtyard held its breath. Maya didn't chase the silence. She used it. One slow step back into shadow, one finger to her lips, and then two open hands. "Watch me." The kind of signal soldiers read without language. The older mercenary, boots square, eyes clear, registered at first. He shifted his rifle to low, ready, and gave a barely there nod.
Across the yard under the tin awning, Hux's gaze locked to her hand. Maya drew a small square in the air, then sliced a diagonal through it. "On my break," and held up 3 fingers. 3 breaths, 3 heartbeats, 3. On one she pivoted to the hinge line of the gate, and slipped a length of torn tarp under the latch. On 2 she angled the tarp so the metal tongue would ride up and over when weight pressed. On 3 she lifted her chin to Hux and the 2 other captives beside him, tired, bruised, not broken, and mouthed down. He slid sideways, dragging his injured arm. The others followed, rolling over a coil of hose toward a stack of crates. A guard started to frown. The older mercenary coughed once, loud enough to draw eyes his way. Maya moved. She crossed the threshold as if the light were hers, hands open, body easy. When the nearest gunman twitched his rifle, she didn't flinch. She looked at him the way an instructor looks at a recruit who's about to break a range rule. That look sent his barrel down by reflex. He didn't know why. He just obeyed. "Keys," she said softly. The interrogator's scarred brow, old instincts, hesitated a fraction too long. Maya stepped closer, palm up. He placed the ring there because somewhere in his bones, a sergeant from 20 years ago still gave orders through comm. She walked the keys to Hux, slid one into his wrist lock, and twisted. The cuff snapped open. Hux sucked air like a drowning man breaking surface. "On me," she said 2 words, steady as a metronome. A guard lurched forward, unsure whether to stop her or ask permission. Another guard raised his weapon a hair and realized his hands were shaking. Then the hinge popped. The tarp guide did its job. The gate tongue rode up, scraped, and dropped free. Wind pushed the gate 3 inches inward. In that small movement, every man in the yard heard a door open that no one had touched. Maya pointed to the dark mouth of the storage shed, then to 2 shapes, captive. Inside, a Navy linguist with a split lip and a Mexican freelance medic, pressed flat to the floor. Her fingers traced a path shed to crates. Crates to the gate, gate to the east. Cut where the mesquite grove swallowed sound. Hux nodded. He tugged the linguist to his feet with his good hand. The medic steadied him. Maya raised 2 fingers at the older mercenary. He made the tiniest circle with his wrist. "I will hold them." The first shout came from the far wall. Panic, not plan. A young gunman had finally named what his stomach already knew. "La Fantasma," he breathed. "The ghost." He jerked his rifle up. Maya didn't rush him. She stepped left into the hard light, letting the glare bounce off her wrists. wraps like pale flags. "Don't," she said. It wasn't a threat, it was a rule. Something in the room said. You could feel it the way a range goes quiet when a range master steps behind you. Even men who didn't understand the words understood the tone. Hux and the others slid to the crates. The older mercenary eased one boot forward, screening them with his body. He wasn't switching sides, he was switching to a code older than war: don't shoot the unarmed. Maya flicked her eyes to the gate. In the gap she could see the eastern desert, silver-gray under moon. The faint rise of the ridge that would hide them from headlights. "Now," she said. Hux moved first. The linguist followed. The medic brought up the rear, eyes wide with a courage he didn't know he had. Maya stepped into the center of the yard and let attention hook to her. That was the trade. The price of their escape was the weight of every gaze. She carried it without complaint. Vargas finally remembered he wore a pistol. He raised it and found his aim wrong. It wasn't his hand. It was the air. The room refused to line up around him. "Stop," he shouted, voice cracking. "Stop, or I shoot." The older mercenary turned enough to face him, palms open, rifle still low. "He didn't say no," he said. "Think," letting the word ride his eyes instead of his mouth. Vargas wavered. Command was a coat he no longer filled. Maya let the pistol point at her. She watched his chest, not the weapon. She watched his breath, how it shook. How it wanted someone else to tell it what to do. "You can," she said quietly. "Or you can fix what you broke when you played soldier." He blinked, thrown by the absence of fear. Somewhere outside the wall from far off to the north, a low thrum rolled over the desert. Not a truck, not a bike. A rotor, deep and patient. Then another. What her signal had started, patience had brought home. Every head tipped a degree toward that sound. A boy dropped his cigarette. Another made the sign of the cross and pretended he was scratching his neck. Maya lifted her hand. Hold. Not a command for the cartel. A promise to her own. Almost. Hux and the two others reached the gate. The medic put. The latch rode and the gap widened like a mouth choosing to swallow them whole. They slipped out. Bodies bent, swallowed by bushes and dark. The first muzzle flash cut the night from the west wall. An undisciplined shot into empty air. Another guard answered with pen. Bullets chewed concrete and screamed off corrugated tin. Down. Maya snapped even to the men who weren't hers. Reflex pulled them into cover. She slid left, scooped the fallen cigarette, and pinched its ember against the gate frame. Spark. Thin smoke curled upward. Wind check. It went east, across the path Hux had taken. So she kicked the ember out, stamping heat into dust. She angled toward the shed, grabbed the length of hose and whipped it against the light switch by the door. Dark. The sudden shadow broke the shooter's rhythm. From the corner of the yard a figure rose, the older mercenary. He took 2 steps into open space and did something small that became enormous. He removed his cap. Not a crisp U.S. salute. Not even a parade rest formality. Just a man who had once learned that before you speak to an officer, you show respect. Even if all you have is a battered cap and a spine that remembers when to straighten. He held the cap at his thigh and inclined his head toward Maya. The yard stopped arguing with itself. Another man mirrored him awkwardly, then a third. Caps, hands to hearts, backs unbending. Not surrender, not worship. Recognition. Vargas stared around, pistol drifting lower. "What are you doing?" he demanded. "She is the enemy." The older mercenary answered without turning. "She is a soldier," he said. "And we are not animals." The words settled heavy and right. Maya didn't acknowledge the gesture with theater. She gave it the only answer that fit. A slight nod, the kind one leader gives another when their worlds meet on the thin line where rules survive. The rotors grew louder. 2 birds, low and deliberate, approaching without searchlights. The courtyard lights flickered. Someone hit a breaker out of habit. The yard dipped to twilight. Out of the corner of her eye Maya saw a hinge of movement at the far wall, 3 of her own. Shapes she knew by the way they ran, slipping through the breach her confusion had bought. She raised her hand.
friendly, and the older mercenary shifted his stance to block a jittery gunman's line of fire. A fresh shout from the gate. Spanish. She didn't need to translate. "They're coming. Cover," Maya called. Not a second too soon. The northern wall dusted with rotor wire. A Black Hawk shouldered the sky above the compound. Doors open, silhouettes braced behind miniguns that stayed mercifully quiet. They didn't need to fire. Presence spoke. A second bird slid to a hover east. The downwash tearing papers from the table and slamming them against concrete. The laptop skittered. The PDA flipped and the photo labeled Raven slid face up against Vargas's boot. A rope dropped. Two figures fast roped, clean, smooth, like ink drawn down a page. The first hit the ground, scanned and locked eyes with Maya. Rank flashed in the moonlight. 05. He didn't bark. He didn't even speak at first. He stepped forward through the dust and rotor thunder, stopped at arm's length, and saluted. A textbook U.S. salute, sharp and simple, offered to a staff sergeant in torn wraps, standing unarmed in a cartel yard. For a heartbeat, every motion in the courtyard froze around that line of respect. A man who owned the sky acknowledging a woman who had owned the ground when it mattered. Maya returned the salute with equal economy. No flourish. No clang. "Raven," the officer said, voice calm through the rotor noise. "You held this place together." "I held time," she answered. "They did the rest." Behind her, Hux stumbled back into view, led by the medic and the linguist, all three blinking against rotor gray. When Hux saw the salute, something inside him broke and mended at once. His mouth trembled. He put his face in his good hand and wept, quiet, grateful, relieved beyond words. Others followed in their own way, one laughing in disbelief, another standing straighter than his body wanted, a third whispering a prayer he hadn't said in years. On the cartel side, a boy with the skull tattoo lowered his rifle to his toes and stared like a child, seeing a storm fall apart without raining. Vargas tried one last scrap of control. He raised his pistol an inch. The older mercenary stepped into his line of fire, not aggressive, just. He removed the magazine from his own rifle and set both weapon and cap on the ground. "No," he said to Vargas. "Enough." The word landed like a gavel. U.S. operators flowed through the breach in disciplined lines, securing corners, zip-tying guns that no longer wanted to be gunned. The dog lay down and put its head on its paws, relieved to be told what to do by people who meant it. The officer turned to Maya again. He didn't ask for a report. He already had it written on the faces around them. "Ready to go home, Staff Sergeant." Maya looked at her people first. Hux, pale and smiling, the linguist holding a hand to his ribs and still making a joke with his eyes. The medic shaking, then straightening when she met his gaze. She looked at the older mercenary. He stood at parade rest over his grounded rifle, staring somewhere 1,000 miles away in a time when uniforms fit and salutes mattered. "Almost," Maya said. "One last thing." She walked to where the photo lay by Vargas's boot. She bent, picked it up, and slid it face down. Not a trophy. A door closing. Then she stepped to Hux and put her palm briefly to his cheek. "Breathe," she said. And he did, the way the whole yard finally did. When the team formed to load out, the officer moved first, but he didn't lead the line. He shifted half a step and let Maya take the center just for 10 paces. The distance it takes to turn a courtyard into a memory. The rotors swallowed their shadows and lifted them into night. Below, the men who had mocked fell quiet. Some touched their cap. One or two copied a salute they didn't know how to finish. It wasn't perfect, it was human. Maya didn't look back for long. She glanced once. Enough to honor the strange hush that comes when a room learns what respect feels like after laughing at it. Then she faced forward into the slipstream and closed her eyes. They were going home. If this part gave you chills, hit the like and tell us where you felt it strongest. The Blackhawks vanished into the dawn, blades fading to a far-off hum that sounded almost like SERE. By the time silence returned, the desert was a wound closing. Inside the field hospital, pitched along the border ridge, IV bags hummed from poles made of aluminum tubing. The air smelled of antiseptic and burned jet fuel. Maya Torres sat on the edge of a cot, left wrist bandage, dirt still etched into the lines of her hands. Across from her, Corporal Hux dozed with an oxygen mask, tilted crooked. Murmuring through dreams, a medic brushed past. "Vitals are stable," he said. "You're clear for debrief once they finish processing." Maya nodded. She didn't ask for rest. Rest could come later, after the people who hadn't made it were counted, and the living had water again. When the satellite phone buzzed, she almost didn't pick it up. Then she saw the caller ID. Lena Torres, Tucson. "Hey kid," she said softly. Her sister's voice came small through static. "Maya, they told Dad it was classified. I saw the news. Was that you?" Maya smiled, cracked lips splitting. Could have been anyone who didn't know when to quit. Lena sniffed a laugh that turned into a sob. "You always said the desert listens to the stubborn." "It does," Maya whispered. "Still here." They didn't speak about the firefight or the dead. They spoke about breakfast plans, about the stray cat that kept sleeping on Lena's porch, about small things that sounded like mercy. When the line clicked dead, Maya sat holding the silent receiver until her pulse matched the rhythm of its dial tone. The command tent was half lit, its canvas flapping against a rising wind. A colonel in dusty fatigues looked up from a tablet as Maya entered. He gestured to the single chair across the folding table. "Staff Sergeant Torres," he said, "you are being credited with initiating the chain that allowed recovery of 3 U.S. and 2 Allied personnel. You know what that means?" She shrugged. "It means the team came home, sir." He studied her. "You signaled without comms, improvised rescue coordination, contained escalation. That's beyond procedure. I did what I was trained to do." He tilted his head. "Delta doesn't train humility." "No, sir," she said. "But it teaches you what matters when the noise stops." He set the tablet down and leaned back. "Well, Raven, welcome back." The name felt strange in air that wasn't hostile. She gave a half smile. "Thank you, sir." That night, under a tarped sky where rotor wash still haunted the dust, Maya walked the perimeter of the temporary camp. Each tent hummed with low voices. Medics changing dressings. Operators comparing scars. Someone laughing too loudly because the alternative was silence. She stopped at the last cot where Hux lay awake staring at the nylon ceiling. "You sleep?" she asked. He shook his head. "Can't. Every time I close my eyes, I hear the sand moving." "That's okay," she said, pulling up a stool. "Means you're listening." He turned his head. "Back there when they took you, I thought." "Don't," she cut in gently. "You did what you could." He frowned. "You didn't even have a weapon." "I had options," she said. "That's all training is, learning to see the options. Panic hides them." He absorbed that in silence, then managed to grin. "Still calling you Raven?" She shook her head. "Maya is fine. Raven belongs to the people who didn't make it out of training." He nodded, understanding more than he could say. Later, sitting alone beside a portable heater, Maya opened her small notebook, the one she always carried but rarely wrote in. The pages were warped from sweat and dust. On the first blank line she scribbled, "Selection isn't about who survives the hardest day, it's about who stays human after it." She paused, listening to the night settle. Somewhere, a coyote yipped. A guard cleared his throat near the checkpoint. Ordinary sounds. Life's. She thought about the young gunman who had dropped his rifle, about the older mercenary who had saluted in the end. She wondered if they'd remember that moment when the desert cooled, or if it would dissolve like mirage. Her instructors used to say Delta built invincible minds. They were wrong. It built human ones, people who could bleed, fear, and still decide right over easy. Morning came gray and windless. The medevac birds lifted the wounded first. Maya stood with her gear bag slung low, watching the sunrise crawl over the dunes she'd crossed on foot. A young airman helping load the stretchers stopped beside her. "Mom," he said, "how'd you do it, out there alone?" She glanced at him. Barely 20, eyes too clean. "I wasn't alone," she said. "I had every instructor who ever yelled at me, every teammate who trusted me, and a sister who'd be angry if I didn't come home." He nodded like it was scripture. When he walked off, Maya looked back once toward the compound's distant ruins. Smoke rose in lazy curls. She didn't feel triumph. She felt something quieter. Gratitude measured in breath still taken. She whispered almost to the desert itself. We bring them home, that's all. In the end, that was the truth of Maya. She didn't conquer the desert. She cooperated with it. She didn't defeat her captor. She changed the gravity in the room until violence forgot its place. Courage, she proved, doesn't shout. It endures. It counts steps, studies shadows, makes calm decisions when emotion wants chaos. Real training doesn't create heroes. It teaches ordinary people to act with grace when nothing else will hold. Somewhere tonight, another convoy will roll through the dark. Another soldier will make a choice between fear and focus. And someone will remember the story of the quiet woman the cartel left to die who turned silence into strategy. And maybe they'll whisper her call sign. Not as myth, but as a reminder. Because valor isn't loud, it's the heartbeat you keep steady for everyone else. The Sonoran sun that once tried to kill her now burned behind the horizon. A fading reminder of everything she endured. They'd mocked her, stripped her of rank, and left her for dead, but she answered with silence, strategy and discipline. In the end, even her enemies stood still, caps in hand, when they realized who she truly was. Maya Torres didn't survive because she was invincible. She survived because she was trained, disciplined, and refused to let anyone else define her worth. If you felt that if her courage reached you tonight, salute in the comments. And if you haven't yet, subscribe to Untold Valor Stories because these tales keep courage alive. Honor the quiet heroes among us, and remind the world what real strength looks like.